Hello, it's Ian Moore again. I've decided I'm going to do a video blog because I'm interested in your views actually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to debrief after every drive I've had, and I'm just interested in your views. So I've just driven back from Warrington. I've had lunch up there after a fleet session. Delivering driver training, and it's taken me an hour and 20 minutes, so which isn't too bad I suppose on a Friday night, but a Friday evening. But there was a few interesting things that happened on the journey, so I thought I'd feed that back to you. So first thing is we come down the Select Road onto the M6. Now the M6, I knew it was really busy. And so I sort of planned for that really. There are other routes, but decided to take that route. So obviously people are going to be irate, but in actual fact, there was a really nice chap in a Volkswagen Golf who, helped me to come out. Was looking for my gap down the Slate Road, but he helped me to come out. But then proceeded to follow me at around about 2 foot at some point behind me. So it wasn't really ideal for what I wanted. I probably wish I'd come in behind him really, but anyway. So you do feel a bit guilty, don't you, when someone's let you out and you try and leave a gap in front of you, but sometimes they get a little bit annoyed with that. But so I was gradually building up the gap so as not to annoy him. He was quite distracted actually. He was playing with his mobile. It was quite clear from what he was doing. It was quite scary really, because he was quite close behind me and quite distracted, but I'm keeping an eye on him. Got a big gap in front, so hopefully. Anyway, at one point we got moving again. Generally it's start-stop traffic, and I'm trying to keep the vehicle rolling. I try and leave a reasonable gap between me and the vehicle in front. And we start sort of rolling up towards the M56 junction, where the lane split off. It splits off into 5 lanes. 1 and 2 go M56, and then the third, no, I think there's 4 lanes actually. 1 and 2 certainly M56, and then 2, 3, and 3 and 4 go on the M6. Well, at this point he was really quite close. He was very distracted, so I decided to swap lanes. Now at this point I hadn't seen any of the signs to say that the lanes were switched, and I thought if I switch to lane 2 he can come past me on the left, because he was obviously quite eager. So I switched into lane 2. So got my signal on, was obviously having a look round, etc. But the key thing there was I had a look over my right blind spot, and there was a chap coming from lane 3 and 4 quite quickly, trying to cut in at the same time. Quite a common sort of incident, particularly in that type of traffic. I'm not quite sure what he was trying to achieve. He seemed to sort of weave in between. He was in one of these sort of vans at MPV sort of things. Quite quick style of driver, but anyway, so I sort of backed off, made eye contact with him, allowed him to come into the lane, and then he scooted off in front of me. And as I predicted, the Volkswagen Golf driver actually came down the left hand side of me. He got on with it. I managed then to move back into lane 1, and then of course the signage come for M56, so my mistake. Had to move into lane 2, and we all make mistakes, I'm not perfect, so had to move back in. So I think that annoyed a few people, but obviously trying to make sure I warn them in plenty of time, thank you, etc. So continuing lane 2, then there's a lady in a silver Peugeot behind me. Why it's always a Peugeot, I don't know, but silver Peugeot. As we come up towards the Knutsford junction, A556. She was quite close. I couldn't read a number plate in the mirror during the whole time, pretty much, that she was behind me, so she was pretty close. We were probably anywhere between about 0, stationary, all the way through to about 40 mile an hour through that stretch. So again, I'm trying to leave a really good gap in front of me, so I can see far ahead. I've got plenty of stopping distance. But again, she's playing with the phone again, so another one. Quite scary really when you look at the amount of people that get distracted by that, and particularly in standing traffic. I don't know whether it's just me, but a lot of people, I don't believe this, but a lot of people tend to play with the phone. But I'm a bit confused with that, because especially where the traffic's actually fluctuating in speed, really that's where you need more attention. Most people sort of switch off at that point, but maybe that's just me, I'm not sure. So she's quite close behind me, in my view, can't read a number plate. Again, distracted. But again, the wagon driver, the lorry driver behind her, was pretty close behind her, similar sort of distance. So I had to sort of monitor that quite closely. So, yeah, I just remembered actually before that point there was an Eddie Stowbar lorry behind me, and this is where the motorway started to open up a little bit. Now, all the overhead signs are saying 40 km ahead, problems further down the motorway, etc., etc., and it continued to say that ever since I got on the motorway. But the Eddie Stowbar lorry, when the road opened up, I didn't quite see the point getting up to 60 because I knew that further ahead there was problems. Otherwise the overhead gantries wouldn't have told me that there was a 40. So I'm doing 45-50, so that's quicker than the sort of advisory, and I know it's advisory, of course I could have done 70 potentially, but I wouldn't have been doing 70 for that long. In actual fact, I probably would have only been able to get up to 60 and hold it there for about a minute, 2 minutes, absolutely maximum. So and that's pretty much it. So it would have been a real struggle to go any quicker than that. But he decided he was going to overtake me. Not only that, with a few flashes of his headlights, and then trying to push me off the road. Actually, I mean, I'm trying to reflect on that to think, could I have done anything differently? If I'd have kept up with the flow of traffic, yeah, that could have prevented that. But maybe he was annoyed because he was late, or he was obviously stuck in that traffic. I get that, I totally understand it, and certainly maybe I could have kept up the flow a little bit more. But about 2 or 3 minutes later, he then came to a stop. So, and in fact, in the distance, about a minute after I was doing sort of 45-50 mile an hour, I could see there was stationary traffic. So, although I get his point, I'm not quite sure how much further he got. I mean, he ended up being, I think, 2 wagons in front of me, possibly 3 at one point. So it was only when I turned off for Stoke that he disappeared. So, and I could still see him in the distance. So I'm a little bit confused with why he got quite so irate. But fair enough. Yeah, going back to the lady in the Peugeot then. So she's texting quite a lot, and I was so tempted to toot the horn when they look down, but I know I shouldn't. So I try and avoid it. But it's very tempting sometimes. But yeah, not looking what she's doing. So eventually she decided to get past me when the traffic opened up. And again, she didn't actually get that much further. She was in lane 2, but I sort of came down the left-hand side of her at very slow speeds, sort of 20, 15, whatever, mile an hour a couple of times. So again, I'm not quite sure what her move out was for. Now that left me with the truck driver that was behind her. He was sensible in some respects, in the fact that he could see what I was doing with the traffic flow. So he was actually looking well in the distance like I was, and I was tending to do the average speed of the vehicles I could see, maybe half a mile ahead, and I was leaving probably a 5-6 second gap most of the time during the whole drive. Possibly more here and there, possibly slightly less here and there, so it did depend, and sort of my minimum was about 2 seconds, but we'll come back to that. So yeah, keeping a nice big gap, but he was pretty damn close behind me. There's a few times, I mean, when we were stationary, because unfortunately that was the case, he must have only been a foot, maybe 2 foot, absolutely, behind me. So I'm a little bit confused on why he was doing that. Although he wasn't that eager when I was going fairly steady, but again with the average traffic flow, so it was interesting to see that. Again, different wagon driver, different reaction. He was also, bearing in mind he was in charge of a 40-ton wagon, he was actually reading, so I could see inside the mirror, he was reading some sort of, I don't know whether it was a file or something. Again, that's quite scary when you think about it. Somebody relatively close to the vehicle in front, but again reading some sort of documents or something like that. Now, totally get that he's got somewhere to go, and that he's maybe trying to find out where that was exactly if he wasn't 100% sure, but not quite sure we should be doing that 30-40 mile an hour when we're in very slow moving traffic on the motorway. So interesting. We had a few middle lane hoggers. It's quite an important day actually today, because the legislation has just been passed with not having to go through the lengthy court process, £100 fine, 3 points on your licence, etc. But And what's really good actually today, that I was quite pleased with, because I've been sort of looking out for it, is police. And I've seen police today. I've seen lots of police pulling people over. I don't know what it was for. I'm looking forward to having a good look on Twitter later, just to see whether or not lots of people have been prosecuted for middle lane hogging, tailgating, etc. So that's been quite good for me today, to see lots of those being pulled up. So from my perspective, my vision is 0 deaths and serious injuries inside a car. If we can get to that point, brilliant. So I think it's Volvo who have got a 2020 vision, which is something similar. Nobody hurt or seriously injured inside their cars by 2020, which is just awesome. So and ultimately, I enjoy driving, nothing wrong with it. I don't mind putting my foot down, but on a busy motorway, when it's really, really busy, you have to ask yourself the reason why bother. That comes on to a few other points that I'm trying to think of, some of the other things that happened on the motorway. It's just very, very odd behaviour. We had some weaving. Had a black Astra who decided to come out from lane 3, undertook a chap, moved into lane 3, and then subsequently stopped because of the fact that the traffic had stopped. So not quite sure what they achieved by that. Middle lane hoggers. Yeah, we saw. It was a Astra GTC. Having a lot of problems with Astras today. Astra GTC in the central lane. I'm really not sure why they were there, and that was throughout the traffic being quite busy. Now, one thing I do sort of question as to whether or not we should be in lane 2 on the approach to a slit road with busy traffic, but my approach is always to stay in lane 1 and to leave gaps to let them on. How many people sort of just don't let people on when there's a slit road? I personally would like the space in front of me so that people can move on or off or whatever they want to do, but a lot of people close up that space, and where's everybody going to go? They've got to get on at some point. Either they've got to get on 10 cars back or one in front of me or whatever, so that's my view. But I think that could have been the reason why, but they didn't actually move in from lane 2 even when the slit road had obviously disappeared and there was miles between them, so not entirely sure why. So that was interesting. Anyway, we then, just before junction 15, where I came off towards Stoke-on-Trent on the A500, the one before that one, which I can never remember what that is, Sandbach maybe, there was a white van, combi van behind me. He was obviously coming off. Now again, I don't tend to do the full 70 for long periods of time on the motorway. Now, I know that's going to annoy some people, but let me explain. I tend to find that on, and this, please correct me if I'm wrong, but anybody that's driven on the M6 will know that you can't sustain 70 for very long on the M6. Even if you do, it's a minute and then you come back down to 60 anyway, 65, whatever. So I tend to back off, go with the flow of the wagons rather than the cars, because what happens with the cars is they speed up, slow down, and I'm trying not to get hit from behind. I'm trying to leave space. It's very, very difficult to do that at that sort of speed. So I tend to go between 60 and 65. I do hit 70. I did hit 70 on that run, but I tend to stay in lane 1, leave gaps, etc. I do overtake. I did overtake a few times, slower moving wagons and things like that. But anyway, so the white combi van came in behind, obviously to come off for Knutsford or wherever it was. Now, in front of me was a truck. I was keeping a 3-second gap, something like that. I think he'd pulled in front of me quite sort of sharpish, so I was backing off a little bit. Bearing in mind I had the truck driver behind me as well, although he was keeping a safe gap when we were moving fairly quickly. But combi van comes in behind me, and he was racing up behind me. I say racing, I mean he must have been doing 75, 80. But I'm not quite sure where he was going, and then he proceeded to come quite up to nearly the point where I couldn't read his number plate again. So I gave him a flash of my brake lights. I didn't use my brakes, I just brake lights. I'm not for one for hammering on the brakes when there's someone close behind me. What's the point? But just to say, you come in a little bit close, leave a little bit more room, that type of thing. But no, it didn't seem to work. Anyway, he proceeded then to overtake me in the lorry and then move back in, and then he got stuck behind another wagon waiting to come off, and he must have only been a couple of metres behind them, waiting for about 20 seconds before he came off the slip road. If he'd have stayed behind me at a safe gap, he would have come off 30 seconds later. I don't know whether I'm missing something there. I don't know whether there's this eagerness to sort of go quicker, or you can only go as quickly as the traffic in front of you, can't you? Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Yeah, certainly he could have used lane 2 and sped off and whatever, but I just didn't quite see the point. Also, I mean, being behind a truck at 2 metres or 3 metres behind at 60 mile an hour, really? I mean, first of all, can you see beyond the truck? If the truck stops, where are you going? Also, what's on the back of the truck? If that comes off, where's it going? Well, there's only one place. So it scared. That does scare me a little bit that people get that close. I'm all for putting your foot down. And I know it doesn't sound like it, but put your foot down on the motorway where it's safe to do so, and leave a safe gap, leave escape routes to the left and the right. I'm quite happy with that. In fact, I'm actually all for increasing the speed limit on the motorway from a personal level, but with mandatory training and well enforced motorways, which is another subject. But anyway, comes off onto the A500. So yeah, the next thing that was a bit odd on the A500 was again doing about 65 in lane 1. There was a wagon behind me miles away, and I think another car as well. Lane 2's fairly clear. I think one came past me, and this slip road, there's a Volvo that comes down. It's a 70 mile an hour dual carriageway at this stretch. He must have been coming down at 45 mile an hour. Again, am I missing something there? I mean, if I'm coming down a slip road, and the traffic's doing 65, 70 mile an hour, I'm doing 60, 70 mile an hour, so because you've got to join the traffic, you've got to either be in front or behind them. So and he had traffic behind him as well. So I don't know, again, if I'm missing something, or is there a reason why? I mean, he looked like he proceeded to come down the dual carriageway at 50 mile an hour. Now, I'm all for doing 50 mile an hour if the traffic's doing that sort of speed, but surely you're not slowing down traffic behind. Is that more of a risk as they come down the slip road? Quite scary. Proceeded to come up. Of course, it stopped on the A500, and again I got a Volkswagen Polo barn, quite an old Polo with a guy with a beard and curly hair. Nice enough chap, but very close. And again, very close means that I couldn't see his Volkswagen badge. And at the point which we're coming down to slow-moving traffic, I still couldn't see his Volkswagen badge, and I was doing 45 mile an hour on the approach to this, bearing in mind it was stationary. I saw it well in advance, probably half a mile, brake lights on, hazard lights on, people slowing down. I saw a tanker 2 or 3 vehicles behind me. He started slowing down, so hazard lights came off, but the Volkswagen was glued to my bumper, and again, I'm not quite sure why. So eventually it started speeding back up again on the A500, and carried on, etc. And then we came off. Oh yeah, just before I came off, there was a lady in a Range Rover who was behind me. Seemed like quite an intelligent. I mean, if you own a Range Rover, they're not cheap, so you'd have to have a decent job for that, or certainly a husband might have had to, or maybe her. And she came in behind me, straddling the lanes. Not quite sure why that was, and then without a signal, and then she decided, it was clear though, and then she decided, oh no, I'm going to overtake this person. I mean, in fairness, again, the traffic's slowing down in front, so I've left. I'm at a 2-second gap there because they're sort of doing a fairly reasonable speed. I've had to back off to get that 2-second gap because of the traffic flow. So then she overtakes me, moves in, and she just signalled after she moved back in as well. Again, fair enough if that's what she wants to do. It's no problem at all. And then there's a people carrier. It's a silver Renault Espace, 7 people in the car as well, which is obviously holiday or family or what have you. Relatively close, and I could see that he wanted to make progress. Again, that's no problem. But I'm coming off onto a 30 mile an hour road. Now, okay, change of speed limit. I am a driver trainer. If I get caught for speeding, I have to inform the Driver Standards Agency, right? I get 3 points on my licence, and also what does that look like? So I have really got to comply to speed limits. In safety terms, in that particular scenario, I'd be maybe going a little bit quicker if that wasn't the case, I'll be honest with you. Because as you come off that slate road, you're coming down from a 50 down to a 30, and in the distance, yeah, there is traffic lights, there's potential for pedestrians crossing. But in order to protect myself there, I would have made the brakes even longer than I had already, and slowed down a bit more. But yeah, I'm down to the 30 limit. And then I could see, again, in the distance, and I mean, there must be a good 500 metres, 250, 300 metres between there and the traffic lights. And I could see they're on red, and they've only just turned to red. So again, I'm backing off. Again, they overtake me. They stay in lane 2 to go straight ahead at the lights, and I'm turning left. I arrived just when the lights had changed, but they must have been sitting there for a good 20, 30 seconds, sort of gawping at me. Again, is there something I'm missing? I mean, I try and arrive when the lights are changed and the vehicle in front started to move forward. It saves me fuel. It means I'm less likely to be hit from behind. It also gives me the opportunity to move left or right. At that point, I can swap lanes if I need to, etc., etc. I'm just planning ahead. That's what I've been programmed to do. That's what, as a driver trainer, that, looking and planning ahead, etc., etc. And I do get that people want to make progress, but again, he arrived relatively rapidly at the lights, put his brakes on quite hard, stopped. 7 people sort of went forward and then come to a stop again, and then he had to get going again. Again, 7 people inside a car, it's a lot of vehicle to get moving. So again, please comment on this. Please tell me what your thoughts are. I don't know if I'm missing something, but from a road safety perspective, I'm looking at 0 deaths and 0 people injured and seriously injured on the road. So that's my aim. So I don't know. Anyway, we then turn into Shelton, which is quite a built-up area, and there's several pedestrian crossings there. I'm a little bit confused with the crossings. Again, please help me on this one. Right, so busy area, lots of pedestrian crossings. I come through nice and steady. There's no one behind me that's particularly causing me any concern. Miles away in the distance, so no problem. There's one chap that's half crossed on the crossing without pressing the button, which I sort of get, but then he's looking at me like, are you going to stop? And he's now still in the middle of the crossing. But I'm thinking, well, if you'd have pressed the button, then the lights would have changed and I would have had to stop for you anyway. So I continue through cautiously, because of course if he crosses the road, I've got to stop. But equally, again, I want to try and continue my journey. I don't want to be forcing him to cross the road, because I know there's a gap behind me. Anyway, so again, on the next crossing, I've got a nice Asian lady who comes up towards the crossing. She hasn't pressed the button, but then it expects to cross the road again. So, and usually the pedestrian crossing's there because somebody's been killed or seriously injured. Usually, mostly speaking, I mean, these things cost £30,000 to put in. So why would they, possibly more than that on some of them, why wouldn't you use the facilities if it's there? But then she started to cross behind me. Looking in my mirror, there's a group, a family, crossing the road about 3 or 4 metres from the crossing. Just press the... Is it me? Again, am I missing something? Please comment on this. But please, why not use the button? Do you feel guilty because you're slowing the cars down? I mean, sometimes, yeah, I do get that bit. If it's completely quiet, I sort of get that as well. But not entirely 100% sure, really. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. Just double check coming up there. Yeah, coming through. Yeah, up the hill. I think that's pretty much it, and then arriving back at home. I mean, where I live at the moment, it's quite interesting. There's a lot of problems with road safety, I think, in the street, and it's double parked cars on both sides of the road. But what I don't understand is you've got kids, and they will mill about in the road between the cars, but they walk down the middle of the road. Pedestrians. So we've got a footpath on the left and the right side of the road, but they'll walk from one end of the street to the other. I mean, in fairness, it's a quiet street. And I sort of get it when they've got a buggy and there's a few bins on the street, it's a little bit tight, but in fairness, the pavements are quite wide. They're not even got that much of a curb on them either, so it's not that difficult. But we have a lot of people that walk directly down the middle of the road. I'm not quite sure what the reason is for that. Again, if you're trying to prevent an incident from happening, or you're thinking about it. Now, I'm certainly not trying to say that the road is for cars only. It certainly isn't. It's for pedestrians. That's what it was there for originally, and then it was horses and horse and cart. So cyclists, yeah, totally. But again, I'm not quite sure why you'd walk down the middle of quite double parked cars. I'd say it's quiet, but there's been good 15 cars that have come past whilst I've been sitting here. So anyway, so I'm interested in your comments. Come back to me. Certainly pick me up on anything that you don't agree with what I said. Again, talked about speed earlier. My philosophies on speed. I mean, my big thing is I don't like using fuel. Fuel's expensive. So I mean, I've just got 62.2 miles to gallon, 40 miles. An hour and 20 minutes, from Warrington. So from my perspective, I've had the aircon on a little bit of the way. Halfway I wound the windows down because I got fed up with the aircon being on. But I'm quite happy with that. I certainly could improve it, but it was quite slow moving traffic. The major way I improved it was avoiding stopping completely, and that's the other thing I don't quite understand is why you'd want to stop and then start again and stop and then start. I'd like to keep the car moving if possible, but certainly, yeah, come back with your comments. Interested in hearing what you're going to say. Hopefully I can come back to you on the next blog that I do. I'll try and update you once I've done a journey. I've got the chance to sit down and have a chat to you about it. If you're one of them drivers, come back to me, have a chat with me. I'm quite willing to sort of see it from your point of view, and I think that's the important thing. I do try and see it from other drivers' point of view. I think doing a lot of fleet work and going out with company vehicle drivers, I get it from their perspective. They've got targets to meet. They've got they've got sales to meet, they've got telephone calls to make. Yeah, I get that, but does that mean that we have to completely forget road safety? Does that mean that we have to drive really close to the vehicle in front? I think there's just that added pressure of that type of job. Yeah, and yeah, I get it, but yeah, come back to me on that. Tell me what you think, and tell me about if your job involves driving, that type. There's another one as well. Oh, there was this was yesterday actually. There was I went to Subway in Stoke, and there was a chap. I walked into the door, and the chap said to me, he said, well, I've never seen anyone part manoeuvre or reverse so bizarrely, which I thought was quite an odd comment. I don't know whether he was sort of talking to me, but bearing in mind nobody else had reversed back into the space, and the only other person that it could have been was the people carrier that, as you come in on the right hand side, that reversed back. So that's the only other one it could be. I was quite deliberate with my observations on that one, because there's a potential you're doing manoeuvring quite close to the entrance, so you might have thought it was a bit OTT. On observation, which as far as I'm concerned, you can never do enough. But again, I get that. So if that's what your thoughts are. But then he proceeded to get into a van, him, a young girl, and the driver of this van, and none of them put the seatbelt on. So I think that's pot kettle black. Personally, you just said, well, that was a bizarre manoeuvre. I'm overdoing my observations, maybe. Isn't that a good thing? Especially if you've got a young girl, then I'd be wanting people to make sure that they look round their vehicle. Yeah, and then get into this van and no seatbelts, and he literally all of them drove down the road, no seatbelts on at all. So yeah, all respect to you, but I do hope that you get caught on some of these new fines, £100. But again, if you're that person, please come back to me and have a chat to me. And that's my view. It doesn't mean to say I'm right or wrong, but that's my thoughts on it. But thank you very much for listening. Please come back and give me some comments. Thank you.